So let's get started on the first step with being able to do EPP with hexies. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your fabric. So you need 7 pieces. I've included 14. So there's enough for 2 flowers. You'll have your centerpiece, depending on the variety of fabrics that came in your kit. Every kit's different when it comes to the fabrics. The supplies are all the same, but your needle book and all of your fabrics for your hexies and your jewel petals are a variety, a mix match of beautiful art gallery fabrics. So I did want to let you know, every fabric in here is art gallery, and each kit has a variety. They're not exactly identical or exactly the same. So what you'll do is you'll take your 7 hexies, 1 for the center, and then 6 will go around it. And so that's what I'm going to be using with this one. And you've got your hexie paper. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn your fabric upside down. So ugly side up, pretty side down. And you'll place your paper there in the middle. And I like to sometimes put just a little dab of glue right there, just to kind of hold that down. Like that. Get it fairly centered. It doesn't have to be perfect, but fairly centered so you're using the same amount of fabric on each side. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you on this piece here. So when you're gluing, you want to try to use the edge of your glue pen and not hold it up and down like this. Just hold it to the side, just kind of like you're writing like this. And when you put the glue on, you're going to want to put the glue not completely on the edge, but close to the edge. Because when you fold this over and you eventually are stitching them together, you definitely don't want to sew through the paper if you can keep from it. It happens sometimes, but it's easier that way to not have the fabric glued to the very, very edge, but right here. So you'll actually just put some glue there, and then you're just going to gently, with your fingers, fold that over like this. Now you're going to fold it over where it's taut, not tight. So what that means is you don't want this to be pulled so tight that you can't grab about 2 threads of fabric when you're stitching through. You're not going to stitch down very far, but if this is too tight up against the paper, you'll end up sewing through the paper. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it just makes it easier. It takes a little bit of practice. So again, you'll use your glue stick and just glue, a strip there. And you'll fold this over, again, taut, but not tight. And you'll just keep turning your fabric and folding it over. And, if you're not perfect the first time, that's okay. That's why I've given you 3 so that you can practice with. And you'll fold it over again. Not too tight. And on this last fold here, let's see if I didn't get enough glue. Make sure you get enough glue. On this last one here, the only difference is you're going to start from left to right and right to left, because if you pull your glue stick all the way down, it's going to pull this fabric over. So take your glue pen and glue that way, and then this way, go that way. And then you'll fold it over like this. Okay? So now you have your first hexie, and you can see that it's glued around. Now these papers are going to come out once we get through some of the process with stitching your hexies. You'll remove these, and this glue is not like cement, so they're easy to pull out. Now I do have a separate video that I will tag for you on being able to make leave-in stabilizer papers. If you decide you don't want to use papers that have to be removed, I make my own leave-in stabilizer hexies. I'll show you one really quick. It's made out of this. It's firm stabilizer, and you can leave these in and you don't have to remove these. I'll link that video for you below so you can see how I did that with my Accuquilt, but a lot of people don't have Accuquilt, and so papers work just fine too. And these papers are reusable. If you don't bend them and tear them up, you can use them over and over again several times. So you will just continue this process for all of your hexies. So you'll just lay all of your pieces out the way you want them. If you want to turn certain hexies in a certain direction, you can. I think this looks good for me. And so now what you'll want to do is you'll take your thread and you'll pull it out. Ultimately, I like to do an elbow's length. So I'll pull it all the way to my elbow. And then I will cut right there where that was and use about that much thread. I find that that helps not to get knotted up too bad. And also, since this is polyester thread, it tends to not get knotted and get caught up and break as easily. So that's why I use poly. You're then going to want to thread your needle. And everybody's a little different with how they like to do their knots. I'm just going to show you my way, but if you want to do it another way, you can. I actually tie 2 knots at the top of mine just to secure and make sure that the thread does not come out when I'm stitching. Sometimes if I just do 1 knot, then, whoops, I don't have my glasses on. I should have put those on so I could see better. If I have 1 knot, sometimes it will come undone. So we've got 1 there, and then I'll go through and do a 2nd knot. Some people don't knot theirs at all. I don't prefer that way because I inevitably will accidentally pull my thread the whole way through. So 2 knots there seem to work good for me. And then you'll want to do a knot at the end. And again, some people, they will do it different ways with their knot at the end. I just loop mine through. And it takes a little getting used to do it. If I had my glasses on, it would probably be a little faster. But I put 1 knot there at the end of the thread. Okay, so this is up to you if you want to use your thimble or not. You ultimately will put it on the finger that you push your needle through with. I don't tend to use a thimble. I have when I was using other needles that were like thicker and kind of hurt my fingers. Again, I like this Sue Daily because it's long enough where it doesn't hurt the joints in my fingers so much, but it's completely up to you. You just figure out what's comfortable. So what I like to do, again, here, see your needle minder. When you just set your needle down, it's helpful to put it back down on the needle minder. There's a magnet in there and it keeps you from losing it. I use my clover clip. You'll place your fabrics right side together. So you'll take one of your petals from the outside, lay it on top of the center petal, and then clip it. And that will keep it in place. And you'll just make sure, can wiggle it a little bit if you need to, that it's lined up from edge to edge. Then I'll take my needle, and let me zoom in. What you'll do is I like to go underneath the fabric so that it hides the knot. So I'll come underneath the fabric here like this, just to hide that original first knot there so that the string is back behind the tail. And then I go ahead and push it through, and you're just trying to come down about 2 threads down from the top. Now keep in mind, when you first start doing this, it's easy to go through the paper, and you usually can feel it if that happens. It's not a huge deal. You'll still be able to pull the paper out. You just might have to tug a little bit more. But you'll go ahead and just pull that all the way through to the end. And you may want to actually move your clover clip on the other side so it doesn't get caught up when you pull this through every time. So we've gone through once, and then I'm going to come back through one more time here. And then I'm going to go from the front to the back and tie a knot. So I really like to secure mine at the front. So I go through a couple of times to secure that. So you tie that knot there and you are ready to get started. So what you're going to do, again, come over and you're trying to look for consistency on how far your stitch is. You can see I was here and now I've come down, maybe 1/8 of an inch. And you'll take it from the back and pull it all the way through. And again, you've only gone about 2 threads lengths down. Again, about 1/8 of an inch, and you'll pull it through. And I like to go from the back to the front. Again, sometimes people have different ways that they like to do that, but I hold my needle this way too with my thumb and with my finger. But if you find another way that is more comfortable for you, you go with that because you want this to be enjoyable. And this is where that methodical part of just stitching is just so relaxing to me. And you will just pull it through and just keep trying to get consistent with your stitch as you go through, about 1/8 of an inch apart, all the way to the end. And so I'm going to keep doing that till we get to the end. Okay, so now we are at the very end here of the hexie. And again, you'll want to make like a loop, a knot. So I'll push it through, and then I'll loop it through that loop, and that way it is in a knot. You can take your clover clip off, open it up, and you have stitched your first 2 hexies together. So you notice the reason you only try to go about 2 thread lengths down is you want it to be secure enough that these are not going to come unsewn, but you don't want it so far down. See, if I had come down about 3 or 4, you would see the thread from here to here, and you want to try to keep it from being extremely obvious. And you can see the thread just really blends in with this silver color. I sell this also in my shop by the spool, so you could get that if you stitch a lot at home. These are easy when you're traveling with, just to use the bottom line spools like this, the little bobbin spools, because they're small and compact. So once you have that knotted, the great news is if you've used the elbow length of thread, you don't have to cut it yet. So you'll just take your next flower, make sure you like the way it's placed, which for me, it doesn't really matter. You'll place these right sides together, and you're always kind of focusing on the center. Your center is really home base, that center hexie. Get that lined up. Get your clover clip, put it there on the side to keep those together. And then I do the same. So I will go from the back here to the front one time, and then I'll come back again. And this is where I'm going to make that knot. So when I've almost pulled it completely through, I'm going to stick my needle through that loop and pull a knot so that it's secure. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to keep stitching all the way to the edge, about 1/8 inch between each stitch. Now, as far as your thimble, let me show you how you could use that if you want to. So you can peel this off, and you might not be sure which finger you use to push the needle through. It could be this one, it could be this one, and it could be a certain part on your finger. So this is reusable. I don't tend to use one, but some people, especially when they're new at stitching and their fingers aren't really used to it, they like to do that. So I'll show you how that can work. And again, it depends. If you use this finger a lot, you may not like how that feels. But if you just use these 2 fingers here like this to go through, and this one holds back, then that can work for you. Otherwise, you might want to move it to this finger. You'll just play around with it and see what's most comfortable. Some people find thimbles are awkward and they don't like to use them. So here, if you want, and the needle's bothering you, after you push that through, you can just push it through with your thimble and pull it out. I'll show you that again. And again, if it's on this one, you're going to want to use your thumb and this second finger here and push it through that way. If you want to do it like that, you could move it down to this finger if you want, so that you've got these 2 fingers to stitch. This is how I stitch, is with my thumb and my index finger, and then push it through with your second finger there like that. Completely up to you. So I'm going to take mine off. I'm used to stitching, and not that I have calluses, but you just, you know, don't have to use it. You do you. You do what's best for you. So I'm going to keep stitching again all the way to the very edge here like we did last time. Then once you get here, you're going to tie that knot again. So here we are again. There's your center, and we are at the very end. And so again, just as a reminder, you're going to come through and you're going to tie a knot there at the end just to really secure that. I think I might have missed that. Got caught on the other hexie. You'll see that loop. Just bring your needle through there and tie it off. Take off your clover clip, and now you have sewn this petal to your center. And so you're just going to turn it, take your next petal, right sides together, line that up really well, use your clover clip. You've still got more thread, so you're going to be able to stitch all the way through here. Whoops, that one just came undone. So what you're going to do now is you're going to stitch all the way. You'll double knot, tie a knot there to get it started, and you'll stitch all the way to the end and tie a knot here. And you'll continue to do that for the rest of your hexies until you've sewn all the petals around your hexie. Okay, did you have fun? All of your little petals should be sewn now, and they'll be loose. They're going to look like this. You've sewn them all the way around your center hexie. So the next step is to sew each of these edges together all the way around. And that process is pretty much the same, with the exception of once you get to the end and you're needing to get to the next section. And so I'll show you how that works. What you'll do at this point, I still have thread that is still available to be able to use to stitch on the next one. So I'll show you what you're going to do. But first off, you can go ahead and take out this center piece of paper, because that helps you be able to bend this over to connect these two on top of each other. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to take out your papers. You're just going to lift up the lip of one of these. The glue easily just kind of comes right up, and you just pull out gently your paper. And you'll feel if you accidentally got, you know, maybe a little bit of paper in there when you stitched, but hopefully not too much. You can reuse these, so just set it to the side. So now you've made it where this is really bendable. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at where did you leave off. So for me, it's right here between these two hexies. So I'm going to bend those on top of each other, right side together. And see, since I took this piece of paper out, I'm able to bend it easier. So I'm going to pull that over like that. I'm going to use my clover clip there to keep those together. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, is I'm going to go in as close as I can to that intersection there, about 2 thread lengths down, and I'm going to tie a knot. If you want to do 2 knots, you can. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to literally stitch about 1/8 inch apart all the way down till you get to the end. Now, when we get to the end, I'm going to show you what you're going to need to do. You have 2 options to be able to get to the other side, to be able to do the next crease. So I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so now you've gotten to the edge here of your hexie, and you have one of 2 options depending on how much thread you have left. One is you can just snip this thread off, which is what I'm going to have to do, because I'm not going to have enough to be able to meander over to the other side to start a new stitch. If I had longer amount of thread, I would be able to do that. And so the way I would do that, if I had enough thread, is you literally are just going to come on over to the next section that you're going to be stitching. So I'm going to go from the end of this one. So let me show you what that looks like. If we open this up, I've stitched this one together, okay? I'm trying to get to this section right here. So let me fold that back so you can see what that looks like. Okay, I'm here at the end and I'm trying to get right here. So normally what I would do is I would take my thread and just go underneath here and come all the way through to the other side underneath here, where my thread would come out underneath. So I would just be crossing the thread across the back, which is totally fine in the sense that this is going to be appliqued down to something. Some people don't like to do that. They don't mind cutting their thread. A lot of us though, I kind of like to go ahead and not have to cut the thread, then rethread my needle and start over, but it's completely up to you if you would like to do that. So for me, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm not going to have enough thread to actually start stitching this side together here. So I'm going to go ahead and snip mine off. Now, when I say snip, that's what these scissors are. These are snips. So these aren't like meant to go like slow and cut. They're meant to be snipped kind of quickly, actually. So if you've got your thread here like this and I'm wanting to snip it, you're going to snip closer towards the end of the scissors here. And you're just going to not do a slow cut, but you're going to do kind of a quick snip. And it just cuts it really quickly. If you try to go slow, sometimes you may find that it doesn't cut very well. I've found that with these kind of scissors, is just a little tip there. So I'm not going to be able to do that, and I technically would not have gone underneath because I didn't have enough thread. I would have gone ahead and snipped it there at the end like that. Okay, so you've sewn this together. So now what needs to happen is you're going to have to rethread your needle because you didn't have quite enough thread. So you'll go ahead and rethread your needle like I showed you, elbow lengths worth of thread here. Get that knotted, double knot it here, and then one knot at the very end of your thread, and then I'll show you what to do where we pick up right here. Okay, I have my needle rethreaded a long enough length here from my elbow. And what we're going to do is, since we had to cut this, same thing. You're going to just go to your next section that needs to be sewn together. You're going to fold both hexies on top of each other like that. Clip it on the side. And you will take your needle and you'll start again kind of under the fabric there. Bring it across and then make another stitch and tie a knot in it. So just bring it through that loop and secure a knot. And then you're going to continue to stitch all the way down till you get to the end here of the hexie. Now, if you have enough of your thread left, once you get to the end here, if we pretend this end is right here, you can bring your thread under, and then immediately, let's see where we're going to be. We'll be here. So you'll immediately, when you get here, be able to bring your thread under to get to the next section that you need to be able to sew together. So you'll have to kind of open this up and look and see where you'll need to be. So for this one, let's go ahead and open it up. So if I got to the end right here on this one, I'm going to want to be able to start right here on this end. So I'm going to want to go from here, underneath to right there so that I can start stitching this one. If you don't have enough thread, you can clip it off. So go ahead and stitch from here to here and tie a knot down at the end. Okay, I've gotten to the end here of this one. Now look, I do have plenty of thread to be able to go under like I showed you before. So I'm just going to open this up, kind of look where I am with my petal, and I know that I need to go, you can see the end of the thread is right here. I need to be able to go across right here and get to that section from the back, because I don't want to cut my thread, but you can. Some people don't mind. You can cut it, and then once you cut it, you'll have to tie a knot in the bottom and then start over. So if you want to do that, do that. If it annoys you to have the thread on the back. For me, it doesn't. So I'm just going to fold this over, and I know I need to get right here to this side. So I'm just going to take my thread under the fabric on the back pull that through. And I know I want to come up right here. So I'm just going to bring that right about there. Okay, so I've gone from right here underneath to underneath here, and I've come out here on the top like that. Okay, so you can just see that there. But if that bothers you, you can snip it off. And you're literally going to continue to do the same process until all of your hexie petals are completely sewn together. So go ahead, start there, tie your knot in it, and stitch it all the way to the end. And go ahead and do that until all of these are sewn together. Okay, congratulations. You have sewn together your first hexie. Now, the fun part too is to be able to take out the rest of the papers on the back. When I say fun part, it just means it's kind of the end of the process. So what you want to do is just take these out gently, because once you do, you're going to want to fold these edges back over. You're going to want to starch and give both sides a really good press. So I tend to, rather than unglue this side, I try to pick here from the inside first because it's stitched to something. So I'll just kind of gently lift that up, and you'll just pull those pieces out like that. And you'll notice you know, your fabric kind of gets a little wonky there. That's why you're going to want to end up going to your pressing station and pressing that back like this. And this is one of the reasons I ended up wanting to choose to not have to take out papers, because it saves me that step of having to kind of press things back in place. So again, just kind of pull those out. And if you got a few stitches that got into your cardboard there, then you'll feel that kind of pull just a little bit there. So again, just kind of finger press those back. But this is a great start. This helps you know, hey, I really love this. And if you really love this a lot and you don't want to mess with the papers, as I mentioned, I'll link for you on how to make those with your Accuquilts. You can do the Accuquilt Go Me, which is a really small cutter that you can use to cut your leave-ins as well as your papers. Now, if you don't want to buy the Accuquilt, you do have another option. And I do sell these in my shop. These are called Hexie EPP iron-ons. And basically, they are like this firm stabilizer that I make myself. Only these iron on. So you iron them to the paper and press them over. They come in all different shapes. And I sell the hexie shape. And may also start, I'm sampling these and trying these right now. I may add the jewel petal to my shop as well. But if you decide, hey, I love EPP, but you know, I don't know if I want to use papers. Those are some other options for you to be able to cut your own. You actually can cut your own papers too if you don't want to buy them. I just think it's pretty cost efficient if you're going to go the paper route to buy those. And I do sell the papers in my shop. So I'll link again, everything that I do sell in my shop, I'll link for you. Some things I don't sell, and you can get those from other places, and I'll put some links there for you as well. Okay, so now that you've taken all of your papers out, kind of finger pressed all that back in place, you're going to take this to your pressing mat. And you're going to gently with your iron, I use my Aliso mini iron because it's kind of a small iron with a nice tip. You're going to want to go through and press all of these edges here kind of back in place and flat. Once I actually have them pressed and flat, then I spray starch over the top and make sure it's good and flat and secure. So I'm going to take this to my pressing mat right now and press that, and then that way you'll get to see what this looks like all nice and tidy. So here we are at my pressing station, and this is my little Aliso mini iron. I'll put a link there for you. It's really handy when you don't want to have to use your large iron for smaller things if you're not familiar with it. I'll put a link there for you, but it's got this nice really wide tip, so you can kind of see where that's going. And you just gently kind of press everything back into place. You see how all that just kind of goes back to its original home. And you're just going to press like this around the entire hexie. So see how all of that is flat again? And then after you press all of this down, where it's really flat the way it was before, we're going to add a layer of starch, and then that will really keep it all flat and together. Okay, so it's all pressed. I'm going to give it a good spray here with my quilting, crafting spray. This stuff is really amazing spray. If you can use it, it's not scented like some of the others, and it doesn't leave flakes. So I switched to that recently from another brand that I was using for those two reasons. And this is actually a mister bottle. So you see that there? So you get like mist all over your entire fabric rather than like a clump somewhere. So I spray that on the back, then I'll spray it also here on the front. Give it a good press. Let's see here. You know what? I did not get that completely folded over, so be careful when you are ironing that back down to make sure you get that folded correctly so that your hexie is in the right place. That is important to keep the shape. Try that again. There we go. Okay, now it's the way it should be. So give it a good spray, give it a good press, and you're not going to want to do the back and forth movement. Just really just kind of set it on there, and you'll feel how firm this is once it's all done. It's pretty firm rather than it being as floppy as it was. You see that? It's nice and stiff. You really want that because ultimately these are going to be appliqued to probably something more than likely. And I'll show you what I did with mine. One of mine is I actually made this mug rug out of mine. And I'll link the tutorial for you below if you would like to be able to learn how to make a mug rug and put your very first hexie onto something that you could use. Your coffee cup here. I have my tea. It's a great place for your tea. And, you know, a cookie or what have you as well. It's the perfect size for that. So it's a great way to be able to use your first hexie. So I'll link it for you below if you want to be able to do that. Okay, so congratulations. You have made your first hexie. And it's such a good feeling when you make your very first one. I actually appliqued mine to it's like a little bag that I have. And you know, the first time I did it, you could see my stitches because I went too far down and all of that, but I'm still super proud of it. And so I appliqued it to something. So you may want to applique yours to something. In the beginning, I showed you, this is one you can get an embroidery hoop. And what you do is you just actually get a piece of fabric. I cut a circle with some pinking shears like this, put it in an applique hoop when I was all finished. And you ultimately stitch it down. I stitched this down by sewing machine on there, and then I hand stitched some embroidery with some DMC thread, pearl cotton, and this hangs in my studio. As I mentioned, the other option is you could make a mug rug, which is super easy too, and I'll link that for you below so that if you want to turn your first hexie into that, you could. You actually, since you have two hexies, if you want, you could do it for each of them. So you actually have something to show for what you made using your beginner EPP hexie kit. So now what we're going to do is, this will be the end of this video, and they're going to show you how to make the jewel petal EPP. And your jewel petal ultimately is going to look like this here, and it only has 6 pieces. I'll link that for you below so you'll have that. It also should come up next in your video feed for you to be able to see the beginner EPP kit to making the jewel petal flower. I'm Belle from Seam Sew Me. Thanks for following along. If you love this video, please like it and subscribe. And until next time, keep making lovely things.